Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not Too Comic Book. This bigger show we talk about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about Loki, Season 2, Episode 4. Great episode. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Well, first and foremost, let's start off with the Ravonna situation. We immediately pick up where last episode left off, and Miss Minutes reveals something to Ravonna. That the fact of the matter is, at the end of the multiversal war, here at the Citadel at the end of time, both Ravonna and He Who Remains stood together. It turns out she was his, I guess by the conversation, his first general when it came to the multiversal war. And it's like, in fact, if it wasn't for her, he wouldn't have won the war because she chose his side. I'm curious why. I mean, maybe she's the Ravonna from the timeline that he's from. I mean, once again, you'd assume he's from this sacred time. I mean, maybe it's that full circle thing. Once again, we don't know if, I mean, it's a thing of, well, Timely was, I guess, always supposed to become He Who Remains, but obviously by creating an alternate timeline, well, by creating a branched timeline that changed things, whatever path Victor Timely was originally supposed to be on, but it seems like it was all for the purpose of making him He Who Remains, because maybe he was always meant to become He Who Remains. Once again, that's still a little unclear, but if that is to be taken as fact, like maybe that's why he likes Ravonna, because maybe Ravonna is the Ravonna from the timeline. I mean, because the Ravonna that's a teacher, maybe she's from, maybe that's on the sacred timeline. I'm assuming the Ravonna we saw last season when B-15 was like, yo, look, we're all variants, right? So maybe it's the same Ravonna, or maybe it's a one from a different timeline. Maybe he chose a Ravonna. I mean, because maybe across all the multiverse, him and Ravonna being a thing is always consistent, but maybe he ended up falling for a very specific Ravonna. And it's just interesting that the Ravonna that like Timely was going to start having a thing with just happened to be the one He Who Remains had a thing with too. So it feels like it's all too purposeful. So like I said, I don't know if she's the same Ravonna from this particular timeline. From the sacred timeline, I don't think so. But like I said, maybe it's just like a multiversal thing of they always end up together. Kind of, I mean, you know, maybe it's just one of those things that's kind of meant to be across the multiverse in some regards. But, you know, but at the end of the day, it wasn't just Ravonna's memories that were wiped. It was also everyone at the TVA's, because, and he has a protocol for it, and even Miss Minutes is like, are you sure about this? He's like, yes, and even apologizes because he legitimately loved her. I don't think it's the same thing where Victor was like, oh, I can't have a partner. Maybe it was, but for him, it's like, this is too important, so I have to stay here. This is my role as He Who Remains at the end of time. And he sent Ravonna back to kind of take charge of the TVA, because they were supposed to rule the TVA together, because at that point in time, he was the one who created the TVA. He was already ruling it at that point, but this is when he wiped everyone's memories so they didn't remember the time that Loki went back to in the first episode, where He Who Remains was already running the show, because once again he had started it. But this is probably around the time he erased his existence and created the three timekeepers. This is when he started constructing that lie, that facade. So, but for Ravonna, it's like, wait, he wiped my memory. It's like, I mean, we once again still don't fully know why, but for her, it's like, right, I was by your side. In fact, I'm the reason why you won the war. And what did you do? You wiped my memory. Because Ravonna, once again, even if she knew about the others getting their memories wiped, maybe it never occurred to her that she got her memory wiped too. I mean, obviously none of them really knew. Only Loki, as an outsider and all this, ended up finding out about what happened. So maybe you had your memories wiped and now Ravonna's finding out. It's like, yeah, that is enough to piss you off, because you're like, wait, because she was so certain, because she's like, right, I led the TVA, this and that, because just like so many other people in the TVA, you thought so certainly like, okay, especially because she always looked at herself like, I'm the one that's holding the TVA together. Without me, the whole thing's in chaos. So she feels like I'm in this very important role. There's no like, wait, because it makes you question everything of like, wait, so who was I before? What memories did I have? What life did I lead before it was taken from me? Because like I said, I think she looked at herself a little differently than every other person that worked at the TVA. Which is so interesting because I feel like you can draw a parallel to her and Sylvie in that regard, where it's like, right, you came and snatched up Sylvie's life after your life was kind of taken from you and you didn't even really know it. I mean, you probably willingly joined He Who Remains in this multiversal war, but once again, there's just so many parallels. Like I said, maybe I'm grasping at straws there, trying to draw parallels, but I feel like there is something there between Ravona's circumstances and Sylvie's in some capacity, and for her to be the one that kind of took Sylvie from her home and kind of stole her life when in fact her life was stolen and she didn't even really know it, so now her and Miss Minutes are going to, it's like, right, maybe we don't need him. The two women that loved him, and it's like, what we were abandoned by him. I don't even remember the fact is we had a thing together and he abandoned me. He wiped my memories, made me lose who I was. And Miss Minutes, who is autonomous and becoming her own being, it's like, oh, I've been so tied to you for so long. I've loved you for so long, but it was never like reciprocated. Like I was just a means to an end for you. Both of you were. So nothing, a woman scorned, the phrasing, what was it? Nothing worse than a woman scorned. I'm probably butchering that antidote, but I mean that phrase. But either way, back in the TVA, it's like cool. Victor's like, oh my God, look at all of this. This is crazy. And they're like, right, we need your help. The loom is activated. We need, it's being destroyed. We need your help to kind of fix all of this. So, and Loki's the one that ends up convincing him and like, please, I know, I even love Mobius being like, don't believe whatever Renslayer said about us. Unless she says something good, then believe that. But yeah, they're trying to, fix the loom, and I love that when OB and Victor meet, and once again, the Ouroboros of it all of like, wait, you're OB, like you're the one who I learned everything I know about from in this TVA manual you wrote. He's like, but I know everything I know because of a scientist named Victor Timely, and they even say it themselves. Even Ouroboros is like, oh, the snake eating its own tail, which makes you wonder, does that phrase technically not existent? I mean, it's interesting too, because if you don't, let's use Eternals for example. I mean, because obviously we have like the Asgardians, and I mean, not even just them, we have like other gods in this, across the different pantheons. But like you take, I was like, because Ouroboros is like, oh yeah, like the snake eating its own tail. He doesn't attribute it to his own name. He used that specific wording. So it's kind of like Icarus. Yes, the mythology of Icarus exists, but how did Icarus, the Eternal, die? He flew into the sun. Did he base that purely on, like, he ended up being a self-fulfilling prophecy of killing himself in the same way? Well, granted, he did it more willingly than Icarus did. Icarus, it was a complete other accident, wax wings and all that, flying too close to the sun. But like Icarus from the Eternals did it on purpose. So was it a self-fulfilling prophecy? Even though they do know that they themselves are based on the mythologies, so it's interesting. So that's why I'm saying, like, does Ouroboros not connect that his name means that? Or is it a situation that his existence and all of this situation will attribute what we know as the Ouroboros of eating your own tail to him? Because even Mobius put it out there too, like, oh, which one came first? Like Victor inspiring OB or OB inspiring Victor. And once again, it's a loop. It's, the chicken or the egg, which came first. So, but them kind of fanning out. I love that trio of Victor, Casey, and Ouroboros, because they're fans of each other. Casey's a fan of Ouroboros. Ouroboros is a fan of Victor. Victor's a fan of Ouroboros. So I like that. Like, it's just like and I do like that Casey has even more of a prominent role more and more in this season of like, he's the one helping out OB because he's the one that studied the, I mean, maybe that has attributes to who Casey was on the timeline. Maybe that's kind of attributed there. But yeah, they're trying to find a means to fix the loom. And luckily, Victor has a device that will help. The thing he picked up at the end of the episode back at his lab. Also, I had to correct myself. I thought the place that Sylvie was in, I meant to leave a comment correcting this on the episode 3 review, but she was in Wisconsin. No, was it? I'm blanking now. She was somewhere else. She wasn't where I thought. I thought Victor's lab was in the same place she was. No. He was in Wisconsin. She was in Oklahoma. I believe that's the case. I'm already remembering wrong, but I look back on it, I was like, oh, in episode, where she ends up at the end of episode 1 and where she's at in episode 2, that place, it's, like I said, I want to say it's Oklahoma. The place his lab is in Wisconsin. I thought they were the same place. It wasn't. I was crazy. Either way. But the device he picked up was a device that will help the Loom be able to expand its rings to compensate for the large amount of timelines that were being created now, branching timelines. I loved OB like having his presentation. He's like, yeah, I'm sorry, this is actually so rough and terrible. He's like, I didn't really have time to like make little models of us or make it a different color. And even Mobius like, OB, I think you're being a little hard on yourself. It's great. He's kind of like, oh, thanks, buddy. I love his chipperness. But either way, they're like with this device, they'll be able, like I said, expand the rings of the Loom. So now that someone has to go out there and kind of do what Mobius was kind of doing before, it's like, well, I guess Loki's going to have to book him. Loki's like, wait, why do I have to do it? He's like, well, I'm the one that did it last time. It's like, but why does it have to be me? It's like, because it's your turn. Wait, who said anything about terms? It's like, because no, this is supposed to be you. He's like, no, that doesn't look anything like me. And Sylvie's like, it's not supposed to be anybody. It's wearing a helmet. I even love her being cheeky when Ouroboros was like, yeah, when, all these new timelines I created when someone killed He Who Remains, and you can see Sylvie looking at Victor. She's got a smug look on her face, and she raises her eyebrows, and Victor's almost like, what? I love that. It's like, why are you being smug right now, Sylvie? Like, yeah, that was me. I did that. At the same time this is happening, Judge Gamble is talking to B-15 about, right, we're going to need all hands on deck, and we need to convince Dokes and the others to join our side. But B-15's like, what, forgive and forget? It's like, at the end of the day, you don't have to agree with it, but what she did was because, like all of us, she believes in the TVA and she was trying to protect it. Once again, her mission was a certain way for so long. Now you're telling me, wait, the way we've lived our lives and going about our job this entire time was like the wrong way. It's like, once again, it's that questioning of your entire existence. This has defined you for so long. I mean, for one, you have no idea how long it's been, considering your memories have been wiped God knows how many times, right? So I mean, maybe for all we know, maybe that was the only time their memories have ever been wiped, was back then. But either way, and we still don't know why OB, because obviously there's the theories that OB might be a Kang variant. We also, I will attribute this because I heard it from Maud Garrett that one of her theories was that Renslayer is a Kang variant as well. That was kind of one of her theories. So who knows? But because it's like, why? I mean, that is the thing. Like, you wipe Renslayer's mind, but why not OB? I mean, even though we know OB, and maybe because OB inspires Victor, which you need Victor to be your backup plan to be who you are. Because even Victor was like, wait, I made this, or I will make this, or I did make this and will make it. Timey-wiminess, right? Because he's trying to explore the place. He's like, oh, let me look at all this. They're like, no, come on, Victor, we got work to do. But either way, B-15's just not sure how to handle this situation, and Judge Gamble's like, you'll be able to convince her because you convinced me. Like, if we can get them on our side, like, the fact is that this is an army, like, we can utilize. I mean, we're all after the same thing. We just went about protecting the TVA very different ways. And so we have X5, or rather Brad, talking to Judge Doak, and she's just like had enough of his BS, because he's like, I love that she's like, yeah, like you're the one that betrayed me and told him my plan. He was like, didn't know you knew that. She's like, yeah, I did. Also knew about you living it up on the timeline, Brad, being a big famous actor. And he's like, ooh, did not know you knew that too. It's like, yeah, you abandoned your duties and everything, because he's the one saying like, right, we can rise up and we can basically go live our lives on the timeline. She's kind of, it's not the same, but she's in a similar mindset as Mobius, where she, like, this has defined you for so long. Why would I want to go on the timeline? This is the life I know. But Brad's all about, like, right, we could all go on the timeline. Let's escape here. We could all live the lives we were meant to lead. And so, Doak, it's like, I'm not sure I'm down for that. And B-15 comes in and it's like, right, we don't see eye to eye, but at the end of the day, we all want the same thing. Like, you care about the people that work here just like I do, and everyone's lives will be in danger if we don't work together. And it was like, was it Hunter D90 was like, how do you know for sure you'll be able to convince her? I was kind of worried about him. I'm like, is he going to try and do something to Doak behind B-15's back? But he didn't. I'm jumping all over the place a little bit, but it's just like, I thought that was such and then also like Renslayer showing up later on. and being like, right, you need to join with me. I mean, look at the TVA. Fell to pieces, and I was going for like a couple hours and see what happens. But Doka isn't believing that. It's like, I see you for who you are. The fact of the matter is that you just want, you're doing this for you. You're not doing this for us. It's about getting back power and control. I mean, it has always been that way for you. But it's like, especially when you feel like you're spiraling right now because everything you've known about yourself kind of ended up not being the case. You figure, once again, you kind of lost yourself in the sense that your memory was taken from you, your life was taken from you. So it's like, right. I mean, even Sylvie called you out at the end of the episode. What you want is a seat of power. You always held, yes, what you like were so lofty with your position before, and you know, and now you're trying to get it back, but you're trying to be even more powerful than before. But Dokes isn't about that, you know. Even though X5 is, because she's promising them, like, when this is all said and done, you could go live your lives on the timeline. You know, I even loved calling out Miss Minutes. It's like, you're a disappointment. She's like, oh, don't worry, I know, I'm working on myself. But yeah, everyone except for X5 got killed. And they were all put in a box. And it's just like, she's like, because Renslayer was like, you can't see the bigger picture. And for Dokes, it's like, for the first time, I see the bigger picture, because it's like, oh, you can't trust B15, but it's like, no, but I do believe her. She's always been an honorable person, and she is a person of her word. So I believe her when she says she wants to work alongside of us. Once again, we may not agree with each other, but I respect her because she's always been loyal. And look at your disloyalty to the TVA. You only want to help the TVA for your own purposes. It's not even helping the TVA. It's just about putting yourself in a more powerful position. And the thing Loki was threatening her with the box that shrinks, was threatening Brad with that. She uses it on them and kills every single one of them. Because if you listen to the background sound effects, you can hear dripping. So I guess, like, it sounds, they didn't show it because it probably would have been too, like, it's meant to be gruesome because of the dripping. I'm assuming that's supposed to be blood. Like, who knows? Like, it's just piles of blood, maybe crushed up bone. I mean, their skin is probably still intact, but they're probably like all been squished, and maybe they kind of imploded. Like, maybe it's nothing but like crushed bodies and blood busted everywhere. Like I said, because you can hear dripping, and I'm assuming that's it. Because Brad was horrified, but he just kind of got over it and was like, all right, I want my life back, so I'm gonna go with Renslayer. There's also what I thought was a great scene, a back-to-back scene, was Mobius being like, all right, guys, like, while they're working on that, fixing the loom, how about we go get some pie? But for Sylvie, she was upset by that. It's like, really? We're going to leave it to OB and Victor and Casey? Like, we're going to leave it to them? And what do you want to do? You want to have some pie? Those timelines out there had died, and they're going to continue. And what are you doing? You're eating pie. You know, it's like, right. Because I guess these timelines don't matter to you because, you know, because obviously she takes even more offense of it because herself is from a timeline that no longer exists anymore as a variant. It's like, you are a variant. It's like you turn against your own kind. You found out what you are, and you've been too afraid to look at who you could have been, the life you led on a timeline. It's like, at the end of the day, we don't matter to you because we're not part of the sacred timeline. Like, Mobius doesn't think like that, but obviously she's projecting a lot of that on him, and that look on Mobius just trying to not let it get to him, because Loki talked to Mobius. He knows how Mobius feels about it, that he's scared to look. I mean, some people have wondered, has Mobius actually seen his life on the timeline and he's just scared of what it was? Or was he being truthful when he was like, I don't want to know, because something bad I can deal with, but something good, that's going to break your heart and destroy you. Like, when you find out, like, oh, this is who I could have been. This is the timeline I was from, the life I could have led. And Loki's conversation with Sylvie, and she's like, I know what you're going to say. He's like, Mobius is just like us. He's just trying to see in the dark. And I was like, I thought that was so beautiful, because Mobius is like so upbeat and stuff like that, because it's his way to kind of deal with, like, yo, we're dealing with a depressing situation. Everyone's handling this in their own way. He just, you know, because he had that one-on-one conversation with him, so he knows where Mobius' mind and heart is. And it's like, yeah, he's just trying to like see his way through this, just like all of us. And it's like, I asked you to help me and you didn't. You turned your back on me. She's like, I'm here, aren't I? He's like, yes, but you are here not because I actually asked you for your help. And I thought it was such an interesting, I love that scene. That back and forth they had was so good. And I'm going to butcher all the conversations that they had, but she was saying like, right, how can we trust the TVA? Like, you're talking like the TVA, like, oh, they're gonna, because it's like all these branching timelines, we have to be the ones to protect it. She's like, oh, it sounds familiar. The TVA said that same thing. Like, how are we supposed to trust him? But he's like, look at you. You didn't kill Victor Timely. She's like, because he was scared. And maybe He Who Remains was scared too, but maybe I just wasn't willing to see it. Because it's that thing of like, yeah, he was putting up this bravado of like, yes, I'm so in control. I'll see you soon. But even he can't. I mean, he could predict things to some extent, but I mean, who knows? Maybe this is the 4D chess game of like, yes, he had this all figured out. Everything's going according to plan exactly. But maybe even there, I mean, because once again, even at the end, what did he say? He's like, oh, we've reached a point of no return. I actually have no idea what's going to happen next. That was the whole point at the end of season 1. So, it's scary. For the first time in a long time, he didn't know how things were going to play out. So it is that he's putting on this bravado, but now we also know what he was carrying. Like, the fact is, the woman you love, the person that helped you win all of this, you wiped her memory and left her behind, and you carried on this loneliness. Because now you had Miss Minutes, but that wasn't the same thing. Once again, like, you will always view her as your creation. She would never be your equal. Like, because the way you talked about Ravonna is not the way you've ever, once again, you're a marvel, Miss Ravonna, but like Miss Renslayer, but you never hear him talk about Miss Minutes that same way. Well, speaking of Miss Minutes, like, man, like, she was really leaning into it when she saw all those TVA agents die. She was almost like giddy about it. It's like, Jesus, they've really like upped the like psychopath factor of Miss Minutes this season. It made her super unhinged. We'll talk about another scene later on, but yeah, like for Sylvie, it is this situation of like, how can you trust the TVA? But then Loki had to point out, it's like, yes, people like Doke, yes, they did destroy those branched timelines, but those timelines that are now being branched out and taken care of, that's because of people like Mobius, like Casey, like B-15. B-15 is the one who's fought so hard, and Mobius was there too, like, because he agrees with that mentality now, knowing that what their mission is incorrect, their mission statement has been wrong, that we need to change. And so for her, like, they do care about all of this. They wouldn't be trying so hard to protect everything. And Loki talks about the fact is that you can't just give free will and just walk away. It doesn't work like that. For better or for worse, time needs to be protected, and we need to be the ones who kind of guard it. But for her, it's like, that sounds a lot like playing God, which is what He Who Remains did. And it's like, well, we won't, because Loki's like, we won't handle things the way He Who Remains does. It is that complicated thing of absolute power corrupts absolutely. I mean, the question was He Who Remained wrong for doing what he did? Yes and no. Was he corrupted before he got all that power and stood as He Who Remains at the Citadel at the end of time? Yes and no. It's a complicated thing of like, they are Lokis. Can we be trusted with all that power? A Loki who is still fresh off of, once again, at the peak of him wanting power. Like, he's had his moments throughout the other movies, but this is the peak of him wanting power. I mean, technically he got it pretending to be his dad, faking his death, but also being his dad at the end of, throughout from from Dark World until Ragnarok. All throughout that, he had that power to some extent, right? Kind of kicking it with the Grandmaster during Ragnarok. Kind of had some power, so on and so forth, right? But this is Loki at his peak of being so angry about the first Thor movie, and then even going through, this is him right after Avengers, but his adventures, his journey of seeing what his life was going to be like on a timeline, his life from everything that happened after Avengers up until the beginning of Infinity War, for his story, and then also everything that he's been through over the course of this series has changed him. I even love that he had brought up this conversation about, because his perspective on his brother is limited to Thor 1 for their history up until Avengers, and he's like, my brother went to Earth and he got banished to Earth, but he came back different, And that was so inspired because he thought his brother had gone soft, but then like for Sylvie, it's like, yes, like softness is weakness, but Loki doesn't view it that way. For him, he believes in hope, but for her, it's like, oh, so we have to hope that Victor Timely doesn't become like He Who Remains. We have to hope that the TVA isn't evil. We have to hope that this all works out. That's a lot, which for Loki is like, yes, I mean, that's kind of taking a leap of faith of believing and hoping for the best. That's all you can do in this situation because there's nothing else. But going back to that conversation of we're running things like He Who Remains, it's just us being like, sounds like ruling like a god, and Loki just going, we are gods, and walks away. I was like, ooh, I love that line. It is true, but, well, it's that complicated thing of like, should someone be in position to protect it? And like, can it be the Lokis? Can it be Sylvie? Can it be Loki? Like, are they the right people for the job? This Loki, maybe, but maybe that power will corrupt him. I don't know. He's going through so much growth. He's changed so much that maybe he is now, after all of this, became the right person for the job. I don't know. We'll have to wait and see how that kind of plays out, and if that ends up being, well, the end result. So. But because of Ravonna and Miss Minutes, the TVA is under attack. And despite them getting the device ready, Casey, Victor, and OB, which I love that Victor got so fast. Wait. Hot cocoa machine. It's like, yes. And I love that. It's like, it's almost so funny that Mobius is looking at him like, why are you so obsessed with this? It's like, why are you so obsessed with jet skis? But he gets the cocoa machine and gives it the D90. I'm like, is there going to be some twist here? And it's like, yeah, it's delicious, right? Oh my God, this is such a marvel. And he gets pruned by X5. And so he's in front of Ravonna and being like, oh, I'm so glad the two of you are okay. They're like, shut up. Don't want to hear a word. Tell us where the device is. And so he's stalling. And I love because OB ends up shutting down Miss Minutes. She starts glitching out. And I love that he's like, well, mocking me isn't necessary. Because he thought like her glitching like that was her mocking his stuttering. I was like, that's a funny line. But yeah, she started glitching out. And this is what I was saying was so creepy of like her just like glitching out like that. And she's like, wait, Victor, there's one more thing I have to tell you. And in that final form where she was kind of like very opaque and she just had those giant X's where her eyes are. And then she shifts back one more time and she looks like zombie-ish, like a zombie Miss Minutes of like, you'll never be him. And turns into a basic clock of like, hi, I am Miss Minutes. I'll tell you the time. And then disappear. I was like, for one, like that particular image, I might use it for as a thumbnail picture for the video, but it's just like, that was the creepiest Miss Minutes. Like I said, they really like kicked up how creepy she is. I like, because they kind of built upon like what we saw at the, like when she kind of popped out of nowhere, kind of gives you a bit of a jump scare in the season finale. It's kind of almost building off of that this entire season. But either way, we had our full circle moment where it turns out, yes, Loki was the one that pruned Loki. I'd actually completely forgot about the phone ringing situation. And I love, she was like, oh, there you are. I thought she was talking to, like, she saw her Loki, but it's like, well, she saw this Loki and assumed it was her Loki, but then he prunes that Loki and she's like, wait, what? He's like, it will make so much sense later. And then the phone's ringing. It's this very ominous scene. You're like, what is it? Who could it be? What's going on? Obi's like, wow, it took you a long time to pick up. I was like, I love the build up for absolutely nothing because it's just OB calling, checking in on him. So, they end up restarting the system, and because of that, Sylvie and Loki can actually use their magic inside of the TVA now, and they end up going after Brad, and she enchants Brad and makes him prune Ravonna, which I'm like, oh, wow, well, because that's the thing, we know when you get pruned, you get sent to the void. So they're not dead. They're still in the void somewhere. They're not like dead. I mean, unless Elias gets them and then they're gone. But, so she's still around. They're just in the void. So that was an interesting development. But yeah, they saved Victor and now they've got to try and stop this from happening. And it's like, cool, there's a lot of like temporal energy out there, whoever goes out there, and Loki volunteered, but Victor was like, no, I have to be the one in case there's something that goes wrong. I can be the one to help with it. So, and that line I thought was actually a really poignant line too, of him being like, time to be brave, and it's like, all right, let's get to it. And then we got the biggest twist of, wait, what? I think it's meant to be those parallels of, well, what happened last season in episode 4? Loki got pruned. And so the moment Victor went out there, got turned into spaghetti strings. And you're like, okay, cool. So there's the whole like, well, that wasn't the whole getting your... I mean, it's more temporal energy out there now, so... Whereas before, it would have just ripped your skin off, but I guess he got turned into spaghetti strands because it was like being sucked into a black hole. And it's like, wait, did that just happen? It's like, yeah, we're screwed. There's too much temporal energy. No one can go out there now with that. And it's like, it's all over. It's like, wait, is there something we can do? And it's like, nope. I'm like, wait, what? So we're kind of giving this like kind of an Infinity War, because with the exception of last season, episode 4 gave you like the stinger at the end that like, oh, Loki is in the void and he's with all those other Lokis. But this, it's like, is Victor like dead? Kind of like Dokes in them, but then like the loom finally breaks and all of the time like explodes. Everything like gets wiped away. I was like, is this really the end? And episode ends, and I'm like, so are we going to get like a timey-wimey thing where they get blown back? Like maybe like time resets itself to some extent. So they had like, I mean, I could definitely see this being a situation like, once again, what's a prominent time travel like device that kind of gets used in TV shows a lot? Good old time loop episodes. I could definitely see... If they go down this route, I don't know if they will, but I could easily see this being a setup for a time loop episode next. Maybe, maybe not. And it's like, maybe we have a few, maybe not. I mean, because we've gotten time loops before, but that was like with Lady Sith, like kicking Loki in the groin and punching him. That's all the time loop-ish things we got last episode. So it could like come into full fruition if it ends up being like that explosion just sends them all back, and now they're stuck in this loop of trying to stop it up to a certain point, because it's like eventually time will either they're going to be stuck in this loop forever, or it will eventually break down and they're all going to die. So it's like maybe they'll still have a second chance, which means maybe we could do things a little differently, like Doke and them don't have to die. Maybe things with Renslayer play out a little differently. I think we haven't gotten like a full like time loop episode. I know a lot of shows do them, but I love them. I always love time loop episodes. They're, like I said, they're one of the my favorite things about time travel or time loop episodes. I think it's just a lot of fun, and this show being the fun thing that it is, I could see like ending on a depressing note and then having a time loop episode be the next episode. I haven't seen the previews. I don't know what to expect. That's just me throwing that out there because it just feels like the perfect setup for a time loop episode. But whether that ends up being the case or not, like I said, we'll have to wait and see. But I'm so curious to see where all of this ends up taking us going forward into the next episode. But really, that's all I wanted to talk about. Until the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and goodbye.